In the other video, I explained that there are very little Christians who are born again in some parts of the Europe, and I wanted to share my own personal testimony. And I came to faith very early, when I was 13. It was in 1991, and I think what really helped me was that I loved reading since I was a child. And nowadays, I think that people don't write books for children that are so black and white. But when I was a child, the books were really black and white. The characters were very good, and the bad ones were really bad, and it never mixed. And I had this ideal what I would love to be, and at the same time, even as a child, I was very much aware that I am not what I want to be, and I lived what is written in Romans. I want to do one thing, and I am doing something else, and I really felt like a prisoner of sin because I was weak, I was lying, I wanted to be brave, I wanted um, to live a life that mattered, and everything was very empty. There was a lot of fear of future, of death, and of course there were some happy memories from the childhood as well, but I remember this a lot. And when I was 12 and I stopped playing with toys, I immediately started to think about life more deeply. And I also started to think about religion, and it was very easy for me because I knew that religion had something to do with churches and with Jesus, and I had no idea at that age that there are other religions as well. So I never studied anything else. And at that time there was the movie The Gospel According to Lucas in the theaters, but I of course didn't go, nobody took me, but somebody left the booklet from this movie at home, and there was the gospel, and there were the basics and the prayer, and I was really touched by the gospel, and I prayed the prayer just as a poem, but after a few days of thinking, I really realized I wanted to give my life to God, and I prayed it again, and this time something changed. So I was 13 at that time, and it took more than a year before I came to church. When I was a freshman at grammar school and I was 14, I went there with a friend, but I cherish the memory of this year because I wasn't influenced by any Christians, by any religions, by anything. And God was really dealing with me, and He was changing me. And the first thing I realized was that the world suddenly seemed to be more colorful, and the fear from my life was gone. And then the change I was unable of slowly came into my life. There were areas that were always a problem. I was lying, I was shy, and I was fighting with my sisters sometimes, and these were the first things that changed in my life. I started to be braver. I of course stopped lying. I had a better relationship with my sisters. Even my results at school improved, at least for the last year at the elementary school. I wasn't a good student at grammar school because I really didn't know how to learn. But when I was 15, I had really great period with God, and I was happy to be in the church, and for some time the church was really good, but later it became more like a sect, and the connection to other churches was lost. The pastor said we are the best church that exists, maybe perhaps in the whole country, and he didn't want to mingle with other churches that were worse in his opinion, and he became very manipulative. And when somebody left the church, he was a backslider, and people were not allowed to meet him. And he was really depressing. He never encouraged anyone, and he presented life with God as something very hard, and only a few selected people could be really sure that God accepted them. And it took me a while to see through this and to leave this church. And what helped me was also that I went to England for a second time in my life, and I stayed there for a couple of months, and I went to two churches that were much better, and it was encouraging. And at that time period I was 35 already, and I was still single. One problem is that in general there are so very little Christians in our country, as I said in the other video. When there is a city with 100,000 inhabitants, there are usually less than 500 people who are Christians. So it's really about 0.5% of people in the population. And of course it happens in churches that there are usually more single women than single men. And this way it was very difficult for me to get married, because all the single people got married in their 20s, and then there were many women left. And when I was in England, when I was 35, I was praying on an old Roman road among fields, and God told me that within a year I would be married. And I came home in November, and I had some business during Christmas, and the time passed, and it was almost February, and still nothing was happening, and I was really wondering whether it was just my fantasy. But I occasionally use some Christian dating services, and in February there was somebody that caught my attention, and we started to write each other, and then we finally met. And what I liked about this guy was that he was very educated and very clever. He was an associate professor at a university, and I was very much impressed by this, because I wanted a clever guy. And I usually, when I saw the profiles on the Christian dating service, the guys might have been nice, but they were not educated. And so I was happy to meet him. And there was another thing I really liked, that he immediately told me, I like you, I want to see you again, and he was clear about his intentions. And in the past it happened to me that I had some friends who were not so clear about their intentions, and I suppose there were some intentions, and at the end they happened to marry somebody else. And it happened to me at least twice, and for the second time it was really heartbreaking. It was somebody who I considered to be the guy of my dreams at that time, and then he married somebody else, and he was so friendly, and he spent time with me, and he was never clear about his intentions, and obviously there were not any. And I was glad that somebody was very clear, and that I could be sure from the first moment that he wanted to know me. And about a month later, when I admitted to him that I never had a serious relationship, and that I was still a virgin at the age of almost 36, he was very impressed by this fact, because he himself came to God much later. In his life he was around 30, but yet he didn't have any serious relationship himself. because he was studying so hard to get his PhD and to become an associate professor. And he said that he always felt that sleeping around was disgusting, and he wanted to keep himself for some serious relationship. So I was very grateful for this, because there are so many friends who married somebody who was divorced and had already children of his own, and there were always these tensions that there were other children that the woman had to accept in her life, and they were sometimes with the man and sometimes with the mother. And as we didn't have any previous relationships and children, we really moved in our relationship fast, and he was so impressed that I didn't have anyone that he wanted to get married soon after we met each other, and there wasn't time to wait for anything if we still wanted to have children. And we were discussing the date of the wedding, and my parents usually go somewhere during summer, and they didn't want the wedding to take place in summer, and he didn't want to wait until September, so we married in June, and we knew each other for months at that time, and sometimes it feels crazy when I remember it, but this way God's promise that I would be married within a year actually came true. And it wasn't all sun and roses, but it wasn't bad either. It took a time to get used to each other and to figure everything out. And after a few months, when I still wasn't pregnant, I was a little bit worried because I was 36. And when we went to the church, we asked for prayer, and it was interesting that I probably got pregnant that very same day when we asked others to pray for us, and it was in January, and it seemed like a great miracle, but actually our first son is autistic, and I really don't want to speak about this very much, because it's a thing that is difficult for me to understand, that you pray for a miracle and you get an autistic child, but I believe that God is very good these days, but for a time I was really wondering, is he punishing me for something? I didn't cope everything the best way, but I don't believe this is his character. I believe there is healing, and the healing never came instantly, but sometimes I remember Shrek. He said, August have layers, and sometimes it seems that the autism peels off slowly in layers. And when I was pregnant for the first time, I always had these dreams about my future child. Actually, when we got married, I had many dreams that I would have a little boy. And immediately when I got pregnant, I started to have these dreams about a little girl. And I had so many of them that I started considering this idea, and I got used to this. And when I was told I was expecting a boy, I was really shocked. And it wasn't that I didn't want a boy, I wanted to have at least one son, but it was because of the dreams. And I would like to encourage everybody not to rely on some dreams and to be open to everything. And for the first time it took several months to get pregnant, so I had wonderful pregnancies. Even in later age I didn't have any complication like the young women around me had. And when I was pregnant for the second time, I didn't even feel pregnant. Sometimes I went to see the ultrasound picture just to believe it, to make sure. And all my pregnancies were great, but the deliveries, perhaps due to the age, didn't work out, and I had 3 C-sections. And after the first child, we were told not to get pregnant again for 9 months, and I thought it would take a long time to get pregnant again because I was also breastfeeding and all this stuff, and I was pregnant within a month. So we had 2 children, 18 months apart. The girl was born 2 days after my 39th birthday, and it was really crazy. One day, I remember I was sitting at the table, breastfeeding the baby, trying to eat my lunch and feeding the boy, who didn't eat properly on his own. And then came a really difficult period, because the boy was sometimes aggressive towards me. He was biting my legs, he was hitting his sisters. He bit his sister a few times, and sometimes it was really dark time for me. I was unhappy and I didn't know how to deal with him. And the problem with autism is that the lighter the autism is, the later it is diagnosed. And only when he was 6, somebody told us that he could be actually autistic, and only when he was almost 8, we went to a psychologist because there is long waiting time for this, and we had it in black and white on paper that he was actually autistic. When we found out he was autistic, it was a relief because sometimes we really felt like the worst parents in the world. We were not patient enough, and I was angry and depressed at the same time because he was so bad. And it was also because his speech wasn't very good, and his emotions matured much later. Only when he was 6, he started to be a little bit sensitive towards others, and he's not Asperger's. He is close to it, but when people are diagnosed with Asperger's, they usually talk better, and he didn't speak that well, and this is probably why some of the things matured later in his life. But even though we had this problem, we had another child. He was only 4 when our last child was born, and twice before she was born, I was told by God that I would have another little girl, and that was actually a relief for me because the boy was so difficult, and to have those 2 girls was so sweet, so easy. It was so much joy in being their mother, and everything was so simple with them. And it is to this day, but these days the boy is 10, and he is much easier to deal with, but there are of course always some challenges, and sometimes we have to be really patient, and we have grown in this perhaps a little. Sometimes I see mothers of sweet little girls who are not doing anything terrible, and the mothers are just screaming and impatient, and it's just because I think they don't know what it is to have a really difficult situation, and when you carry a heavy burden, you become stronger. But sometimes my husband asked what if we had another child, what if we adopted or helped another baby, and I thought that the question came way too early in my life. I wasn't ready for it at all, and it was as if I was already carrying an elephant, and he said, "Oh, why don't we carry a giraffe also? We can manage to carry 2 very heavy animals at the same time." And later everything became so much easier that we actually decided to become foster parents. And I would like to say that being a foster parent in Europe means something a little bit different than in America. And it seems to me that in USA the children go from one foster parent house to another, and here it's different. These days there is a law that little children under 3 years of age shouldn't be placed in group homes, and this should change, that it should be under 7 very soon. And there are two kinds of foster care, and one is that they are short period foster care takers, and these have the children for about 1 year, and they usually take babies, and when all the legal things are settled, the children usually go back to some relatives, or they go to the long foster care. And when the children enter the long foster care, unless the family demands them back, they can stay in one family for their whole childhood until they reach 18 or until they finish their studies. And we applied for this long foster care, and I believe that also because we had this experience with autism, that we became more patient in some areas and stronger in some areas, and that it prepared us for possible complications. But I really had this assurance from God it would be all right, and I really admire the big fostering families who have 6 or 8 children, but it also scares me at the same time, and I think not everybody has to do something so big. And for now we have applied just for one foster child, and it should be a girl, because it would be closer to our children. And we went through all the preparation in 2025 this year, and now we are waiting to get the little girl, so we are stepping into another season of parenting, and our children are 6, 8 and 10, and they go to school, and now we should have another child under the age of 2, and we are to be 50 in 2 years, and we are together almost 12 years. We are married for 11 years, and I am really curious and looking forward to this new adventure, and I believe that it's going to be good and that it's going to work out, and maybe sometime later I can speak about being a foster mom. But now we are in the time period of waiting for the officers to finish all their papers and make their final decision. So this is my testimony about faith and marriage and children, and among all these activities I also fulfilled my long life dream, and I started to write books, and I really feel that the period of marriage is the best and also the most fruitful period in my life, because we started to be active in one charity with my husband, and only because he is so educated and he loves reading so much, I was able to move forward with my own writing, because I think I always knew how to write, the style of it, but I was weak in inventing plots and making the plots more difficult for my characters. And in the beginning, with my first books, he really helped me, and he in a way made me what I am today. And now I can write more easily because of him. And I have written about 15 books, but it will take some time before I translate them all into English. Of course, I use AI for it, but then I have to make many corrections and make sure that the text actually says what I mean when I don't understand it. And it's a lot of work, but I am also enjoying it. So being active in charity, having children, writing books, and becoming a foster parent is occupying me a lot, and this is what I live. This is what my life is about at the present. And of course I have some other hobbies as well. I like gardening, and actually I am also propagating and selling plants from my backyard, and I enjoy having a greenhouse, and I am planning to have some hens in spring. But the biggest project that we are looking forward to at this time period is the foster care.